Princess Zarathiel stood at the massive window of her tower chamber, watching another delegation of suitors depart in their gleaming vessels. The Xyrillian diplomatic ship lifted into the crimson sky of Valtara Prime, its crystalline hull catching the light of the twin suns. She counted them in her mind. That made 47 rejections in the past cycle. "Your Highness," came a soft voice behind her. Zara turned to see her advisor, Minister Kelthane, approaching with his usual worried expression. His blue-scaled face showed the stress lines that had deepened with each passing month. The Xyrillian ambassador seemed particularly displeased with your decision. Zarathiel moved away from the window, her silver robes flowing behind her. At 24 standard galactic years, she was considered past prime marriage age. For a princess of her standing, her violet skin held the traditional markings of the Valtaran royal bloodline, and her forearms moved with practiced grace as she adjusted her ceremonial jewelry. "They're all the same, Kelthane," she said, settling into her favorite chair carved from Valtaran crystal. The Xyrillians offered technological supremacy. The Thekmari promised military might. The Zephyrians boasted of their vast trade networks. "Every single suitor comes here believing their civilization's strength will impress me enough to secure an alliance through marriage." Kelthane's secondary arms fidgeted with his data pad. "Your Highness, the Council grows more concerned each day. The Dominion War draws closer to our borders. We need allies, and these marriage proposals represent the strongest military and economic partnerships available in this sector. I know the politics, old friend." Zarathiel's voice carried the weight of her position. "But tell me something. In all these proposals, have any of these mighty civilizations asked what I think? What I want? What I might contribute beyond being a pretty symbol of their conquest?" The question hung in the air. Kelthane had served her family for 30 years, and he knew the princess spoke truth. Every delegation arrived with impressive displays of their civilization's achievements, but treated the actual marriage as a mere formality. They spoke of what their alliance would provide Valtara, never what Valtara might offer them. "The council meets tonight," Kelthane said carefully. "Your father grows impatient. The reports from the outer systems are troubling. The Dominion forces have taken 3 more worlds this month." Zarathiel closed her eyes and felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The Dominion was a ruthless empire that consumed worlds like a plague. Their biomechanical ships turned entire populations into mindless soldiers for their endless expansion. Every free world in the galaxy lived in fear of their dark fleets appearing in their skies. Valtara Prime was wealthy and strategically located, but militarily weak. They had always relied on diplomacy and trade, rather than warfare. Now, with the Dominion approaching, they desperately needed protection. A marriage alliance with one of the major powers was the most obvious solution. "Have there been any new requests?" she asked. "Actually, yes. Something quite unusual arrived this morning." Kelthane consulted his datapad. "A message from a species called humans. I've never heard of them. They're requesting permission to send a diplomatic envoy, but their message was different." "Different how?" "They didn't mention marriage proposals or military alliances. They simply asked for permission to visit and learn about our culture. Their message was signed by someone called Ambassador Sarah Chen. And she mentioned that her people are new to this region of space." Zarathiel opened her eyes. In her experience, any species advanced enough for interstellar travel was already well known in galactic politics. "What do we know about them?" "Very little. They appear to have emerged from a relatively isolated arm of the galaxy. Our intelligence services found no records of them in any major databases, but initial scans suggest they control perhaps a dozen worlds, militarily insignificant compared to our usual suitors." Despite herself, Zarathiel felt curious. "And they're not requesting a marriage negotiation?" "No specific mention of it. They seem genuinely interested in cultural exchange." For the first time in months, the princess smiled. "Grant them permission. I'll receive this Ambassador Chen." "Your Highness, is that wise? They're clearly a minor power." "The Council won't approve of time wasted on meaningless diplomatic meetings when major decisions await." "B. Testavadesavire. They're clearly a minor power for meetings." Kelthane. For once I'd like to meet someone who doesn't immediately try to calculate my value as a political asset. Let them come. 3 days later, a ship unlike anything in Zarathiel's experience descended toward the royal landing platform. Instead of the usual crystalline perfection or biomechanical fusion common to advanced civilizations, this vessel appeared almost primitive. Its hull was metal and ceramic, marked with atmospheric burn patterns and micrometeorite impacts. It looked like a ship that had actually been used rather than simply constructed for impressive appearance. The princess watched from her balcony as the ship settled with surprisingly gentle precision. The landing was smoother than most, despite the vessel's rough exterior. Whatever these humans lacked in aesthetic design, they apparently made up for in piloting skill. The airlock opened, and a figure emerged that made Zarathiel lean forward with interest. Ambassador Sarah Chen was clearly not built for impressive appearance. She wore a simple blue uniform without excessive decoration, and her brown hair was pulled back in a practical style. But there was something in the way she moved. Confident without arrogance, alert without paranoia, that caught the princess's attention. More intriguingly, Ambassador Chen spent several minutes just standing beside her ship, looking around at the architecture and landscape. She wasn't immediately demanding an audience or presenting gifts. She appeared to be genuinely appreciating her surroundings. "Minister Kelthane," Zarathiel called, "please invite Ambassador Chen to join me for tea in the garden chamber, rather than the formal throne room." "Your Highness," protocol demands. "Protocol can adapt. I'm curious about someone who travels across the galaxy just to appreciate architecture." An hour later, Princess Zarathiel sat across from Ambassador Sarah Chen in the comfortable garden chamber. The human had accepted tea graciously and complimented the beautiful flowering plants that grew only on Valtara Prime. She had asked questions about their cultivation and shown genuine interest in the answers. "Ambassador Chen," the princess said, "I must admit, your approach is unique. Most diplomatic visitors spend considerable time explaining their civilization's achievements and military capabilities." Sarah smiled, and it was the first completely natural expression Zarathiel had seen from a visiting diplomat. "Your Highness, I studied our intelligence reports on Valtara Prime during the journey here. Your people have built something remarkable, a peaceful, prosperous society that maintains independence through wisdom rather than force. Why would I insult your intelligence by bragging about human achievements when your accomplishments speak for themselves?" The princess felt something she hadn't experienced in months: genuine surprise. "Most visitors seem to believe that impressing me with their power is the path to successful negotiations. With respect, Your Highness, that approach suggests they see you as someone to be impressed rather than someone to negotiate with. My government sent me here because we've heard remarkable things about Valtaran culture and wisdom. We're hoping to learn from you, not lecture you." Zarathiel set down her teacup and studied the human ambassador carefully. "What do you know about the Dominion threat?" Sarah's expression grew serious. "We know they're expanding in this direction. We've encountered their forces 3 times in the past year. Each engagement taught us more about their capabilities and methods." "Encountered their forces?" The princess leaned forward. "Your species fought the Dominion? But you said you only control a dozen worlds." "Size isn't everything in warfare, Your Highness. Humans have been fighting wars for our entire recorded history. We've learned that victory doesn't always go to the largest fleet. The major powers all tell me that only their military protection can save us from the Dominion. They offer marriage alliances as the price of their security guarantees." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "That's a traditional approach. But it makes you dependent on their continued goodwill. What happens if your protector decides you're no longer worth protecting? What happens if they demand higher prices for their protection over time?" The question struck Zarathiel like a physical blow. In all the months of marriage negotiations, no one had pointed out this obvious flaw in the alliance strategy. Every suitor had presented their protection as a permanent guarantee, but agreements could be changed and allies could become enemies. "What alternative do you see?" she asked. "Independence through strength, not necessarily military strength. Your people clearly excel at other forms of power, but the strength that comes from not needing anyone else's protection, How can a peaceful people achieve that kind of strength? Sarah's smile returned. Your Highness, that's exactly the kind of question my people would love to explore with yours. We believe the best solutions come from cooperation between equals, not dependency relationships between the powerful and the weak. As the afternoon continued, Princess Zarathiel found herself engaged in the most interesting conversation she'd had in years. Ambassador Chen discussed philosophy, strategy, and culture with equal facility. She asked questions that revealed deep thinking rather than trying to impress with predetermined answers. Most remarkably, the human never once mentioned marriage proposals or alliance terms. She seemed genuinely interested in understanding Voltaran society for its own sake. When the meeting finally ended, Zarathiel realized the sun had set without her noticing. Ambassador Chen, would you be willing to extend your visit? I find myself curious about these human perspectives on independence and cooperation. I would be honored, Your Highness. My crew was hoping to learn more about your fascinating world anyway. As Sarah departed, Minister Kelthane approached with a concerned expression. Your Highness, you spent the entire afternoon with this human. The Council expects a report on the diplomatic value of this meeting. Zarathiel watched Ambassador Chen's retreating figure and felt something she hadn't experienced since childhood. Genuine excitement about what tomorrow might bring. Tell the Council that I'm exploring new options, she said. For the first time in months, I'm talking to someone who doesn't assume they know what's best for me. That night, as she lay in her chambers looking out at the stars, Princess Zarathiel thought about the human's questions. What would true independence look like? What forms of strength didn't require surrendering her freedom to achieve security? For the first time since the marriage proposals began, she fell asleep without feeling trapped by impossible choices. Outside her window, the small human ship sat quietly on the landing platform. Unlike the impressive vessels of previous suitors, it made no statement about power or superiority. It simply waited patiently, like its diplomat, ready for whatever tomorrow might bring. Princess Zarathiel woke the next morning with an unfamiliar feeling of anticipation. For the first time in months, she was looking forward to a diplomatic meeting. Ambassador Chen had requested permission to tour some of Valtara Prime's cultural sites, and the princess had decided to guide the tour personally. They met at the ancient archives, the vast library that contained thousands of years of Valtaran knowledge. Most visiting diplomats showed polite interest in the historical displays before moving on to discussions of military and economic matters. Ambassador Chen, however, stopped at the very first exhibit and spent 20 minutes studying the early agricultural techniques that had allowed Valtaran civilization to flourish. Your ancestors were remarkably innovative, Sarah said, examining the preserved tools. This irrigation system is more efficient than anything humans developed until our 20th century. How did they manage such precise water distribution without advanced technology? Zarathiel found herself explaining the mathematical principles her ancestors had discovered, something no previous visitor had shown any interest in learning. As they moved through the archives, Sarah continued asking detailed questions about Valtaran achievements in art, science, and philosophy. Ambassador Chen, the princess said as they paused before a display of diplomatic treaties. Most visitors seem eager to move past our history to discuss current political matters. You appear genuinely fascinated by our culture. Your Highness, a civilization's history reveals how they think and solve problems. These treaties, for example, show that your people consistently chose negotiation over conquest, even when they had military advantages. That tells me more about Valtaran character than any political briefing could. They were interrupted by the arrival of Minister Kelthane, who approached with obvious urgency. Your Highness, forgive the intrusion, but we've received concerning news. A Dominion scout fleet was detected in the Cathara system. That's only 3 jumps from our borders. Zarathiel felt her stomach tighten. 3 jumps meant the Dominion could reach Valtara Prime within days if they chose to advance. She noticed that Ambassador Chen had gone very still, her relaxed demeanor shifting to something more focused. How many ships? Sarah asked. Kelthane looked surprised that the human had spoken. According to our sensors, approximately 20 vessels. A standard Dominion reconnaissance force. What's your defensive capability? Sarah's voice had taken on a different quality. Still respectful, but with an underlying competence that hadn't been apparent before. Ambassador Chen, the princess said carefully, that's classified military information. Of course. I apologize for the presumption. But if I might make a suggestion, reconnaissance forces don't usually operate alone. They're gathering intelligence for something larger. Minister Kelthane nodded grimly. Our military advisors reached the same conclusion. The main Dominion fleet is probably positioning for a major assault on this sector. Sarah was quiet for a moment, and Zarathiel could practically see her thinking. When she spoke again, her words carried an authority that seemed strange coming from a representative of a minor power. Your Highness, would you be interested in seeing how humans approach defensive problems? I have some of my crew with me who specialize in strategic analysis. Before Kelthane could object, Zarathiel nodded. I think that would be very educational. An hour later, they sat in a conference room with 3 additional humans, who had been introduced as Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, Chief Engineer Kim, and Dr. Patel, a xenobiology specialist. The princess was immediately struck by how different this group was from typical alien diplomatic teams, where alien advisors usually displayed their status through elaborate clothing and formal protocols. These humans wore simple uniforms and spoke to each other with casual efficiency. More remarkably, they included Ambassador Chen in their discussions as an equal, something Zarathiel had never seen in hierarchical alien cultures. Okay, Rodriguez said, studying the defensive situation on a holographic display. Standard Dominion tactics involve conversion bombardment, followed by ground occupation. They don't negotiate, don't take prisoners, and don't retreat once they commit to an assault. But they're not invincible, added Chief Kim. Their technology is powerful but inflexible. They use the same approaches every time because they've been successful so far. Dr. Patel nodded agreement. Their biomechanical fusion makes them incredibly strong individually, but it also creates predictable behavioral patterns. They can't adapt quickly to unexpected situations. Zarathiel leaned forward. The major powers all tell us that defeating the Dominion requires overwhelming force. You sound like you disagree. With respect, Your Highness, Ambassador Chen said. Overwhelming force is one approach. But humans learned long ago that the strongest army doesn't always win. The smartest army often does. Army Force. Army DDO. Army Force Gondespond. Rodriguez activated a tactical display. We've fought the Dominion 3 times now. Each engagement taught us something new about their weaknesses. You won against them? Minister Kelthane's voice was incredulous. But they outnumber you thousands to 1. Numbers matter. Chief Kim acknowledged. But so does knowing how your enemy thinks. The Dominion has conquered hundreds of worlds using the same methods. They've become predictable. Dr. Patel brought up biological data. Their biomechanical enhancement makes them powerful, but it also creates dependencies. They require specific resources to maintain their technology. Cut off those resources, and their advantages diminish rapidly. Zarathiel studied the humans carefully. They spoke with the confidence of people who had actually faced the galaxy's most feared enemy and survived. More importantly, they talked about strategy and tactics with genuine expertise rather than empty boasting. What would you recommend for Valtara Prime's defense? She asked. That depends, Ambassador Chen replied, on whether you want to be a protectorate of another power or remain truly independent. Explain the difference. Rodriguez answered. A protectorate gets defended by its patron's military. But the patron makes all the strategic decisions. You become safe, but you also become a dependency. If your protector's priorities change, you're left defenseless. Independence means taking responsibility for your own defense, Kim added. It's harder initially, but it gives you control over your own fate. How could a peaceful people like the Valtarans possibly defend themselves against the Dominion? Kelthane asked. Dr. Patel smiled. Minister, peaceful doesn't mean helpless. Your people have remarkable technological capabilities. Your manufacturing systems are more precise than anything we've seen. Your mathematical skills allowed you to develop that incredible irrigation system centuries ago. You have the tools for defense. You just need to think about them differently. Ambassador Chen pulled up a strategic display. The Dominion conquers through fear and overwhelming force. But they've never faced a defense based on intelligence and preparation rather than brute strength. What kind of preparation? Automated defense networks, distributed manufacturing systems that can't be knocked out by a single attack, early warning systems that deny them the element of surprise. Rodriguez was warming to his subject. Most importantly, a defense strategy designed around Voltaran's strengths rather than copying someone else's military doctrine. Chief Kim nodded enthusiastically. Your manufacturing precision could produce defensive systems more advanced than anything the Dominion has encountered. But instead of building massive battle fleets, you could create smart defenses that turn the Dominion's own power against them. Zarathiel felt something stirring inside her. The same feeling she'd had as a child when solving complex mathematical puzzles. For the first time since the crisis began, she was hearing solutions rather than dependency relationships. This would require significant cooperation, she said carefully. Absolutely, Ambassador Chen agreed. But cooperation between equals. Humans would contribute our combat experience and tactical knowledge. Voltarans would contribute your manufacturing precision and mathematical expertise. Neither side would be dependent on the other. And after the Dominion threat passes, then you have a defensive capability that belongs to you. You're not beholden to any protector's continued goodwill. Minister Kelthane looked skeptical. This sounds remarkably ambitious for such a small species. What would humans gain from this arrangement? The question hung in the air for a moment. Then Ambassador Chen smiled the same natural smile that had impressed Zarathiel the day before. Minister, humans are explorers and learners. Working with the Voltarans would teach us things we could never discover on our own. Your mathematical approaches to engineering could revolutionize our own technology. Beyond that, free peoples should help each other remain free. The Dominion is everyone's problem, Dr. Patel added. Plus, frankly, we're new to this region of space. Having friends is better than having dependents or protectorates. Zarathiel stood and moved to the window, looking out at her beautiful world. Behind her, she could hear the humans quietly discussing technical possibilities with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested they genuinely enjoyed solving complex problems. Ambassador Chen, she said finally, what you're proposing would require months of planning and preparation. The major powers are demanding immediate decisions on marriage alliances. Your Highness, major powers often demand immediate decisions because delay gives you time to think of alternatives. But you're right. This approach would take time to implement properly. The Council meets tonight to finalize our response to the latest marriage proposals. They're going to demand that I choose a protector. Sarah joined her at the window. Your Highness, what do you think your ancestors would have done? The ones who chose negotiation over conquest, even when they had military advantages? The princess looked at the human ambassador and realized that for the first time in months, someone was asking her what she thought rather than telling her what she should do. The difference was more profound than she had initially understood. They would have chosen the path that preserved our independence and our values, she said quietly. Then maybe the question isn't which major power to ally with. Maybe the question is whether there's a way to preserve your independence while still ensuring your security. That evening, Princess Zarathiel entered the council chambers with a proposal that no one was expecting. Instead of announcing her choice among the marriage suitors, she requested permission to explore an alternative approach to the Dominion crisis. The debate that followed lasted until dawn. But for the first time since the crisis began, Zarathiel was arguing for something she actually wanted, rather than simply choosing the least unacceptable option. As the twin suns rose over Voltara Prime, she realized that everything had indeed changed, not because someone had impressed her with their power, but because someone had respected her intelligence enough to treat her as an equal partner in finding solutions. The small human ship still sat quietly on the landing platform, but now it represented something the princess had thought impossible. A path forward that didn't require sacrificing her freedom for her security. 3 weeks later, Princess Zarathiel stood in the newly constructed command center deep beneath the royal palace. Around her, Voltaran engineers worked alongside human technicians, their forearms moving in perfect coordination with human efficiency to complete the most ambitious project in her world's history. The Council had finally approved her alternative defense plan after heated debates and careful analysis. The major powers had not taken the rejection of their marriage proposals well. The Xyrillian ambassador had warned of dire consequences. The Thekmari delegation had departed with threats of economic sanctions, but none of them had offered alternatives when their protection was declined. Only the humans had stayed to help build something better. Your Highness, Chief Engineer Kim called out. The final phase of the orbital detection grid is online. We now have complete sensor coverage of all approach vectors to the system. Dr. Patel looked up from her biological analysis station. The Dominion behavioral prediction algorithms are running at 97% accuracy. We can anticipate their tactical responses to almost any defensive measure. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. Integration between human adaptive strategy protocols and Voltaran manufacturing precision exceeded all our projections. This defensive network is unlike anything the Dominion has ever encountered. Ambassador Chen approached the princess, carrying a data pad with the latest intelligence reports. Your Highness, our long-range scouts have confirmed it. The main Dominion fleet is moving toward this sector. Approximately 400 ships, including their primary conversion platforms. Zarathiel felt her stomach tighten, but the fear was different now. 3 weeks ago, news like this would have meant helpless terror while waiting for others to decide her world's fate. Now it meant activation of plans she had helped create. How much time do we have? 72 hours until they reach the outer system boundary, Rodriguez replied. But our early warning network will detect them 6 hours before they expect to be seen. That gives us significant tactical advantage. Minister Kelthane entered the command center, his expression grim. Your Highness, we're receiving urgent messages from the major powers. The Xyrillians are offering immediate military assistance if you reconsider their marriage proposal. The Thekmari fleet could be here within 2 days if you accept their terms. And what do they want in return for this last-minute rescue? Zarathiel asked. Complete integration into their military command structure. Essentially, Voltara Prime would become a protectorate with no independent decision-making authority. Ambassador Chen looked up from her tactical display. Your Highness, that's a decision only you can make. But I'd like you to see something first. She activated the main holographic display, showing the entire Voltara system in tactical overview. What appeared was breathtaking. A defensive network so sophisticated that it looked like a work of art rather than a military installation. This is what 3 weeks of Voltaran human cooperation accomplished, Sarah said. Automated defense platforms that can adapt their tactics in real time. Manufacturing stations that can produce replacement systems faster than the Dominion can destroy them. Most importantly, a command structure that keeps all decision-making authority with the Voltaran government. Dr. Patel highlighted specific elements. The biological components are particularly innovative. Instead of trying to match Dominion biomechanical power, we're exploiting their dependencies. Every Dominion ship requires specific organic resources to maintain their enhancement systems. We can disrupt those supply lines. Chief Kim brought up engineering displays. The manufacturing integration is unprecedented. Voltaran precision engineering, combined with human adaptive design principles, we can literally build new defensive systems faster than the Dominion can overcome them. Rodriguez grinned with the confidence of someone who had faced impossible odds before. Most importantly, everything we've built belongs to Voltara Prime. When this crisis passes, you won't owe anyone protection money. You won't be dependent on anyone's continued goodwill. You'll be truly independent. Zarathiel studied the tactical displays, feeling a surge of pride in what her people had accomplished. What if it doesn't work? What if the Dominion is too powerful for our defenses? Then we adapt? Ambassador Chen said simply. That's what humans do best. Adapt to circumstances that should be impossible to survive. But Your Highness, you're not facing this alone. The defense network we've built together is smarter, more flexible, and more innovative than anything the Dominion has encountered. The major powers keep telling us that only overwhelming force can defeat the Dominion. Sarah smiled. The major powers have been saying that for years, while the Dominion continued expanding. Sometimes the old ways of thinking are exactly what needs to change. 60 hours later, the Dominion fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Valtara system. Princess Zara Thiel watched from the command center as 400 dark ships arranged themselves in the standard Dominion attack formation. Each vessel was a masterpiece of biomechanical fusion, combining organic adaptation with mechanical precision in ways that had conquered hundreds of worlds. "They're beginning their approach," Rodriguez reported. "Standard Dominion doctrine. They'll advance slowly while scanning for defensive positions, then launch conversion bombardment to disable our manufacturing capability. They have no idea what they're walking into," Chief Kim added with grim satisfaction. The Dominion fleet approached exactly as the human analysts had predicted. Their biomechanical sensors searched for traditional defensive installations, orbital battle platforms, fighter squadrons, planetary shield generators. They found none of these expected targets. What they found instead was something entirely unprecedented. The first surprise came when their sensors were suddenly blinded by a coordinated electromagnetic pulse that erupted from what appeared to be empty space. The Dominion ships had no reference for dealing with distributed sensor networks that could coordinate system-wide defensive responses. The second surprise came when their biomechanical enhancement systems began experiencing systematic failures. The organic components that gave Dominion ships their adaptability required specific chemical resources. Those resources were being systematically neutralized by targeted nanobiological agents that Dr. Patel's team had developed based on captured Dominion technology. But the real shock came when the Dominion fleet found themselves facing an enemy that adapted faster than they could respond. "Dominion lead elements are attempting to target our manufacturing platforms," Rodriguez reported. "They're finding that every time they lock onto one position, 3 more appear somewhere else." "That's impossible," Minister Kelthane breathed. "How are we producing facilities that quickly?" Chief Kim's voice carried barely suppressed excitement. "Modular manufacturing. Every platform can produce components for new platforms. It's exponential growth that the Dominion's linear tactical thinking can't counter." On the main display, Zara Thiel watched something that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. The Dominion fleet, unstoppable conqueror of worlds, was losing a battle to an enemy they couldn't understand. The biomechanical ships tried to adapt to each new defensive measure, but by the time they developed countermeasures, the defense network had evolved 3 steps further. Human adaptive thinking, combined with Voltaran engineering precision, was creating solutions faster than Dominion biomechanics could respond. "Your Highness," Ambassador Chen said quietly, "you might want to monitor the communication channels. I think you're about to receive some interesting messages." The first transmission came from the Xerillian fleet, which had been monitoring the battle from a safe distance. "Princess Zara Thiel, our tactical analysts are impressed with your defensive capabilities. Perhaps we could discuss mutual defense agreements between equals rather than protectorate relationships." The second message came from the Thekmari delegation. "Your Highness, the Thekmari Republic would be honored to establish trade and military cooperation with Valtara Prime. We believe partnerships between sovereign powers produce superior results to dependency relationships." Similar messages began arriving from a dozen major powers, each suddenly interested in cooperation rather than conquest. But the most important message came from the Dominion fleet itself. "This is Dominion Fleet Command." The transmission began. "We request permission to withdraw from this system. Our mission parameters do not include engagement with defensive capabilities of this sophistication." For the first time in galactic history, a Dominion fleet was requesting permission to retreat. Princess Zara Thiel looked around the command center at the humans and Voltarans who had made this impossible victory possible. "Ambassador Chen, what should we tell them?" "Your Highness, that's entirely your decision. But if I might suggest, showing mercy to a defeated enemy often produces better long-term results than destroying them." Zara Thiel nodded and activated the communication system. "Dominion Fleet Command, this is Princess Zara Thiel of Valtara Prime. You have permission to withdraw from our system. We have no desire for conquest or destruction. We simply wish to remain free." The Dominion fleet departed without another word. leaving behind something that hadn't existed in the galaxy for centuries. Proof that they could be defeated without overwhelming force. In the weeks that followed, everything changed exactly as Ambassador Chen had predicted. The major powers suddenly found Valtara Prime much more interesting as an equal partner than as a potential protectorate. Trade agreements, technology exchanges, and mutual defense pacts flooded in from civilizations that had previously offered only marriage proposals and protection schemes. More importantly, other worlds began asking for copies of the Valtaran defensive technologies. The idea that independence could be maintained through intelligence, rather than dependency, was spreading across the galaxy. Princess Zarathiel stood in her garden chamber 6 months later, sharing tea with Ambassador Chen one final time before the human departed for new diplomatic assignments. The small human fleet had grown into a proper embassy, but Sarah had been promoted to regional coordinator for human diplomatic activities. "I have to ask," the princess said. "Did you know this would work when you first proposed it?" Sarah smiled. "Honestly, we thought it had about a 60% chance of success. But even if it had failed, you would have failed as a free people, rather than succeeding as someone else's dependency. Sometimes that's worth the risk. The galaxy is changing because of what happened here. Worlds that had given up on independence are starting to believe it's possible again. That's the real victory, Your Highness. Not defeating the Dominion, but proving that there are alternatives to the old patterns of conquest and submission." Zarathiel looked out at her world, now bustling with activity as the most advanced manufacturing and research center in the sector. Beings from dozens of species worked together on projects that none of them could have accomplished alone. "Ambassador Chen," she said finally, "I turned down 47 marriage proposals from the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. But I never thanked the person who showed me that I didn't need to marry anyone to be safe and free." Sarah stood to leave, her replacement posting calling her to new worlds facing similar challenges. "Your Highness, you didn't need anyone to show you how to be free. You just needed someone who recognized that you already knew how. That's what partners do. They help each other become the best versions of themselves." As the human ship lifted away from Valtara Prime for the final time, Princess Zarathiel reflected on how completely everything had changed. She was still unmarried, still independent, and still free. But now she was also the leader of a world that had shown the galaxy something new. The aliens had offered her protection in exchange for her freedom. The human had shown her how to protect her freedom herself. The difference had changed not just her world, but the entire balance of power in the galaxy. Sometimes the most revolutionary act was simply saying no to the options everyone else thought were inevitable, and then proving that better alternatives were possible.